Forgive, we won't forget. Those are the chilling words spoken by US President Joe Biden as he vowed to hunt down the perpetrators of yesterday's deadly suicide bombings in Afghanistan.
The two attacks, which killed at least 90 civilians and 13 US military personnel, took place at Kabul airport, one outside the Abbey Gate and another at a nearby hotel. Thousands of Afghans had gathered there with the hope of getting on a flight out of the country. Well, pressure continues to grow on the US to reconsider its withdrawal date in light of the bombings, but President Biden says he won't budge. Well, joining us now is former head of counter-terrorism at the Ministry of Defence, Major General Chapman. Morning. Thanks for joining us. A lot of questions now about who this group are that carried out the attack. It's thought to be ISIS-K. What do we know about this organisation and its strength and its capability?
Well, ISIS-K rose in 2015 and really is part of this shape-shifting landscape of jihadism in Afghanistan and Pakistan. So it's a lot of defections from a number of groups, including the Taliban, a group called the Lashkar-e-Toiba, the Haqqani Network, and another group called the TTP, the Tehrik-i-Taliban Pakistan. So it has a exclusionary philosophy. So if you look at the difference between the Taliban and IS-K on two lines, how does it relate to society as the first one? So the Taliban have talked about an inclusive society, not in the way we would understand that in the West, whereas IS-K is exclusionary in the extreme, very sectarian. We saw that with the attacks on the Hazaris, two awful attacks in 2020, 2021, maternity hospital when 24 were killed and 68 kids in a school killed this year. They were Shia and IS-K is extreme Sunni. The second way to look at this is on the pan-Islam scale. On the left of ARC, the Taliban may be Pashtun nationalists who are guardians of Islam in Afghanistan, whereas IS-K is to the right of the ARC, that is, there for the global caliphate. That is why the Taliban and IS-K hate each other, because IS-K think that the Taliban have been pragmatic, particularly, for example, in their dealings with the Americans. And in 2018, there was an Eid ceasefire when IS-K went apoplectic at that. So there's a huge philosophical and doctrinal differences between the two groups. IS-K is not as big as we think. It's somewhere between 500 and 1,500. Obviously, cells in Kabul, as we've seen, strongholds in Nangarhar province. But that's sort of what IS-K are. But you have to look at why they did this attack. Really, three reasons. Firstly, attacking the civilians who are there. They're marked for death as apostolites because they want to leave and go to the West. Therefore, they cannot be true Muslims. The second one, attack the infidels, 13 dead American soldiers. That's great from their perspective. But the third reason they attacked is actually IS across the globe is in a world of hurt. You know, doesn't have the strength it did in 2014, 2015. And terrorism is partly theater. So the target is partly you and I. It's the audience. This helps with their momentum, helps with their propaganda, and leads certainly in the chat rooms of sort of those who are opposed to the West to say, hey, this is a great event and will further the cause of the caliphate.
I mean, this terror group, ISIS-K, is a relatively small in organisation, but they've made a massive impact. They're on every headline of the newspapers over here. Where does this lead the Taliban? They've been trying to reinvent their image over the last week or so. This would have done so much damage to that. What's their next move?
I don't think it damages the Taliban. If the Taliban have actually consented to us getting out in an orderly fashion, so we've got to take them for their word at the moment. You know, trust them, but check. The bigger issue is within the Doha agreement between the Americans and the Taliban. The first two strands were the American withdrawal and friendly forces withdrawal, which is happening. And the second one was the Taliban to give CT counterterrorism assurances that Afghanistan will not be used as a jihadi theme park in the future by groups like Al-Qaeda and IS-K. Now, that's not just America and Britain that want that. China wants that because of another group called ETIM, the East Turkestan Islamic Movement. The Russians want that because of another group, the Islamic movement of Uzbekistan. So it is not just the Americans. It is the pressure and leverage that you can have from the entire international community, Russians, Chinese, Americans, which may get the Taliban to absolutely reject these groups. And if you have ungoverned space, then that gives potentially the ability to train. But you do not need ungoverned space to become a terrorist. And it is the inspiration from groups like Al-Qaeda and ISK, which of course is the worry back in the UK. The centralization of plots is very difficult to do these days, but the lone actor inspired by an attack at Kabul airport is sometimes very difficult to negate.
So, Chip, what do you see as coming next with this? We know that the Pentagon have warned that there are likely to be further attacks, aren't there? And we know also, when we look at the capabilities of the Taliban now, obviously militarily, they have now inherited all the equipment that were left behind by the forces. So in theory, you know, including sort of the helicopters and everything, in theory, there could be a really incendiary atmosphere there now, couldn't there?
Well, if the Taliban go to the left of Arkan are these Pashtun nationalists only and not international jihadists, and go after ISK, and are not there to provoke strategic, catastrophic attacks on America, that is actually could be seen as a strategic success. On that, we'll have to wait and see.
Chip, should we fear an attack here on home soil?
You should always fear an attack here, and of course, Counterterrorism Command is working on a daily basis. There are 800 investigations on a daily basis. There have been 29 plots since March 2017, and March 2017 is seen as the baseline from Counterterrorism Command. And in that period, of the 12 attacks, 10 of those have been lone actor attacks. I think what we need to do, though, is get back to what I would call the arithmetic of terrorism. So, for example, 3 people were killed in terrorism in the UK in 2020, 2 people were killed in 2019. We've got to get back to really what Frank McKenzie, who I used to sit next to, said last night. You know, he will go after ISK. And what we need to do in the future, in my view, in a counter-terrorist posture, is this is not 2001. We have an intelligence community which is, you know, really up there with the best across the world. We have a military capability to strike anywhere, particularly the Americans, but supported by us as necessary. And we have a hardening of the homeland, both in America and the UK, because of certain both legislation and other developments with artificial intelligence, machine learning, and how you use big data to make us safer and have a completely different environment than 2001.
OK, Major General Chip Chapman there, former head of counter-terrorism at the Ministry of Defence. Thanks very much for joining us this morning to give us your thoughts on the latest situation there and just explaining a bit about the group ISIS-K behind the attacks.